I'm one of those dads poised at the sidelines right before halftime with one of the podiums that I have to run over to its spot on the sideline right before my kid's band goes on, or being there to help hand out the water after the halftime performances and all of those kinds of things. I don't have to practice as much for that, so there could be some upside there.
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of May 20th, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including band director retirement celebrations, a tale of one school band feeding another, fallout from last week's Second Strain segment, and I'm pleased to have a conversation for you that is yet another completely different one from any of the others so far. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. This week's episode appears to have become, for the very most part, a collection of various different ways of addressing the question of leaving a legacy. I love it when a plan comes together, except that this week it's the universe rather than me that has conspired to make this confluence of topics possible. So let's take a break from trying to make the perfect read and instead play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Lincoln, Nebraska. Credit to the reporting of the North Platte, Oklahoma Telegraph newspaper. For the third consecutive year and the fourth time in 5 years, a North Platte High School band alum has been named as one of the drum majors of the University of Nebraska Lincoln Cornhusker Marching Band. Annie von Kampen, a Nebraska Lincoln Rising Senior Music Ed major, was named one of the 300-member band's 4 drum majors. In addition, 2 other North Platte alumni will serve as rank leaders with the 2024 Cornhusker Band. Von Kampen follows fellow North Platte band alums Sidney McGaughan and Stephanie Nolda as recent drum majors of the 145-year-old UNL Band. They were drum majors in 2020 and 2022 and 23, respectively. A brief editorial note and possibly a future podcast episode preview for all I know. This news item reminds me of a particular high school in north central Massachusetts which, starting in the mid-1990s and continuing for at least 2 decades, has become something of a drum major factory for that large local college marching band of which I have spoken quite a bit in these first dozen podcast episodes. Part of that has been the fact that the north central Massachusetts high school's 2 band directors since the mid-90s were both alums of that college band, which undoubtedly augmented the relatively short distance between the 2 bands at schools as reasons for that happening. I was drafted at the end of a Drum Major Academy Clinic week some years ago to take a picture of the assembled past, present, and future Gardner High School drum majors, yes, that's Mayor Mike Nicholson's town, who had been or were currently UMass drum majors or who were currently enrolled as DMA students. There were something like 12 people in the picture, and we could all easily call to mind people who fit those criteria who, for whatever reason, were elsewhere that day. I wonder if, and honestly I have to imagine that, there are other examples of this school-to-school pipeline that perhaps you know of. Do let me know. Podcast contact information is, as always, in our show notes and will be dutifully recited at the end of this episode. Dateline, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. After 31 years as the Broken Arrow High School band director, Darrin Davis will end his tenure as director of bands. Under Davis's leadership, the Broken Arrow band program has earned a reputation for excellence regionally and nationally. Davis's marching band has earned 4 Bands of America Grand National Championships, 21 BOA Regional Championships, and 24 Oklahoma State Marching Championships. The Pride of Broken Arrow has appeared in 3 Tournament of Roses parades and in the 2005 Presidential Inaugural Parade. Davis's concert ensembles have performed at the American Bandmasters Association Convention, the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, Carnegie Hall, and Music for All regional and national festivals, and 6 times as a featured honor band at the Oklahoma Music Educators Convention. Davis is a member of the Bands of America Hall of Fame and the Oklahoma Bandmasters Hall of Fame. Dr. Kelly Pence will assume the role of Broken Arrow band director, but Davis will remain actively involved in fine arts programming for the district as executive director of fine arts. Davis conducted his final concert as director of bands 2 weeks ago on Monday, the 6th of May. At that concert, the Broken Arrow High School Band received the Sudler Flag of Honor from the John Philip Sousa Foundation. Also, Davis made his final appearance as a director of the Pride of Broken Arrow Marching Band at the annual Broken Arrow Rooster Days Parade this past Saturday. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Now let's pause briefly, and then on the other side of the pause, another story of a band director retirement. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, another trip in the Wayback Machine to my days of blogging. This time it's back to June 2015, when I wrote a piece that marked 20 years since I first got to arrange music for a certain college band. Not that one. The piece was entitled, "We Give Thee Thanks for Glorious Days," and a segment of this podcast listenership may immediately know about whom I'm writing, but keep it to yourself because we don't do spoilers around here, okay? Anyway, here's what I wrote on the old blog. Here's another example of I'm weird like that. For some reason, I've kept hold of some sort of evidence that today is the anniversary of a momentous occasion in my professional life. I could well be classified as a calendar pack rat. I got a phone call from a friend of mine, and as was and still is our custom, we launched into a lengthy conversation. How's life and all that? Most times when the phone rings, the route between hello and all right, I gotta go let the dog out takes an hour to navigate, and it's an hour that usually seems like far less time than that. I like friends like that. I like them whether or not they ask me intriguing questions like, how'd you like to write for a big college band? Fun question, though. Somewhere close to the beginning of the phone call I'm thinking of, that question indeed arose. I said, well, I didn't say much for a moment, but I finally did throw the face into gear and asked, what's going on? Well, you're talking to the new director of the University of Delaware Band. Congratulations, should have been the thing that instantly came out of my mouth, because, with all respect to East Overshoe State College, the University of Delaware ain't just East Overshoe State College. It's a major university with a big old band. I mean, people have heard of the University of Delaware. I mean, Joe Biden, for openers. One of the reasons that, again, my mouth was frantically paging my brain waiting for instructions was that the University of Delaware wasn't just any band or just any school within the context of the recent shared band experience of my friend and me. We did, after all, march together at the University of Massachusetts. How to analogize? It was kind of like being asked to join the coaching staff of the Toronto Maple Leafs after having played for the Montreal Canadiens. Asked by one of your former Habs line mates, who is now the Leafs GM. In fact, these two friends, my friend and I, who were on the way to qualifying as the lifelong variety, had started out as two of the three UMass drum majors in the fall of 1987. Our big road trip that year was called the Southern Tour. We didn't nearly make it to the actual South. The Mason-Dixon line was never in danger of being crossed, but it was a solid 6 hours of bus travel south from western Massachusetts. The kind of bus ride where you pointedly took your shoes off. This was going to take a while. And the centerpiece of the trip was the UMass-Delaware football game. For quite a long time, UMass and Delaware had played football in the same conference, which, again, is a little like saying the Habs and the Leafs had a history of enjoying a friendly hockey tilt now and again. The rivalry might not have been as famous as Ohio State and Michigan or Auburn and Alabama, but when you were in the middle of it, it was plenty foam at the mouth, thank you. The bands were polite to each other. I mean, there's certainly no video of any band brawls, but they were also interested in making sure the crowds knew which school was the top dog at halftime, too. For a lot of UMass band alumni, all you have to say is Delaware 1981 or Delaware 1983, or in my case, Delaware 1987, and they use their imagination and fill in all the gaps. So, a former UMass drum major is saying that she's heading up the rival band now? Well, this could be fun. I hadn't gone into lockjaw mode because my friend had asked me to write for her band. She had a knack for doing that. When she taught in the New York State public schools, I got a couple of calls. Hey, I got a tune I want to do with my jazzers. How fast can you write it? She had been assistant director at a prominent Philadelphia area university, curiously one that shared a faintly intense rivalry with our alma mater in the world of men's basketball, and somewhere in there she called and asked, mind if I steal a couple of your charts? As if the answer to either of those questions wasn't a complete gimme. So my brief pause, following this latest offer to pull me into association with yet another of my friend's teaching hitches, had nothing to do with yay or nay. I was just taking note that, well, once is an event, they say aphoristically, and twice is a coincidence. Holy heck, I was involved in a pattern then. Cool. So, testing the waters with an arrangement of a Barbra Streisand tune and following up with a particular Beatles song, and then swerving back and forth amongst such justly famous performers and composers as Eric Korngold and Huey Lewis and that guy Tchaikovsky and Andrew Lloyd Webber and Meat Loaf. Stop right there. I've had the great good fortune and fun of getting to be some small part of the most recent incarnation of the University of Delaware Fightin' Blue Hen Marching Band. That incarnation, I wrote in my blog in 2015, this is still the blog post by the way, just celebrated its 20th year under the direction of my good friend from the 80s. The band has performed in front of National High School Marching Band Championship audiences and in support of a National Championship Division I AA football team and in front of the President of these United States and a certain Delaware alum who was his running mate back in 2019. How they do things in Delaware is a topic that has been featured at a National College Band Directors event. And at least partly because of her efforts, that incarnation of the UD band is on very good terms with a certain other college band from Western Massachusetts. My friend has some idea of how to do things right in the band world. I've just felt fortunate to be along for that ride in some capacity. Not going to discuss the pros and cons of it's not what you know, it's who you know, here at least, but it's safe to say that I hitched my wagon to the right star. I'm a friend of Heidi Sarver. I got to write for her band. Those are two sentences I love to be able to type. 20 years ago today, I wrote on June 13th, 2015, in my blog, it became clear that those two sentences were indeed not a coincidence. At the time, it would have been absurd to try to imagine life that far into the future. Sometimes even the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, is a ridiculous question. Butterflies and flapping and Tokyo and all that. Hindsight being 2020, though, at least one thing is clear. For the experience of arranging music for a big college band, and for all kinds of good stuff that's happened in my life because of that phone call in the middle of 1995, I've got my good friend Heidi to thank. I think she knows that, but it's worth getting it in writing. That is, again, what I wrote then in 2015. This past Thursday, Heidi Sarver conducted her final concert as a professor of music at the University of Delaware, where she's been a member of the faculty of the School of Music since 1995. She has, among other things, directed the 300-member Fightin' Blue Hen Marching Band, conducted the symphonic band, and overseen the administrative operations of the basketball pep bands for these 29 years. In 1999, Heidi pulled me into the little community that is the instructional staff of the George Parks Drum Major Academy, where she is the educational director and lead clinician. But much more important than all the generous things she's done that have enabled me to interact with the band world in some pretty incredible ways, and with some leading lights in the band world, is the mark she has left on the University of Delaware's segment of the band world in particular, and the larger band world in general. She has accomplished what she's accomplished on her own merits, unquestionably, but she has achieved what she has achieved in a subset of the band world that still, shall we say, struggles with gender roles and gender equity. A number of decades ago, the sub-headline of an article about her might have said something like, "She's making it in a man's world." That would hopefully not get past a sensible editor now, but in 1995 it was just not that common to see a woman heading up a major college band program, or even a minor one. Most of 3 decades later, while not exactly entirely commonplace, it is much more likely, to the point that the UD Band Director Search Committee appointed another woman to succeed this first one. Back in November, I managed to make my schedule obey my wishes and made that 6-hour drive from Massachusetts to Delaware 37 years nearly to the day after that trip I talked about at the top of this second strain, to be at Heidi's final regular season home football game with the Fightin' Blue Hen Band. The day was everything I could have hoped for. I got to see a lot of people who had also made the trip to Delaware for that same reason, to see and salute their former band director, their former colleague, their former bandmate, their friend. I got to spend quality time with treasured friends, old and relatively new, from the UMass and Delaware and Drum Major Academy worlds, many of whom I would never have been able to claim as treasured friends had my life, professional and personal, not intersected with Heidi's. But again, much more importantly than whatever fun time I might have had that day, I got to see an entire stadium rightly pay tribute to a band director whose band was kicking the same kind of musical backside that it had kicked for all 29 years of her directorship. And as much as she might have preferred to say to them all, thank you, sit down, stop staring at me, well, that wasn't going to happen, and, well, good. I shadowed Heidi as she made her way around the stadium's vast pregame tailgating areas that morning, and in doing so, I got to see her descended upon by well-wishers. Every few seconds, it seemed, she crossed paths with someone who immediately was killing themselves to congratulate her, to thank her for what she'd done with the band, to thank her for what she'd done for them. It was very much a "this is your life, Heidi Sarver" stroll, and having known her for as long as I have, I was able to detect that she was a little unprepared for the sheer volume of responses just in that stadium walk, never mind the entire rest of the day, and that she was probably more than humbled by it all, and again, maybe a bit uncomfortable. When you're in the midst of doing the work, you're just trying to get the work done. A lot of times it's only when you turn around and look back that you can see that, hey, there's a trail of breadcrumbs. That's the path. That's the body of work. And there are a whole lot of people who have benefited from that body of work and who will in the years to come because of the work, because of the foundation that has been laid down. Heidi Sarver is a friend of mine. I got to write for her band. Those are indeed two sentences that I love to be able to speak. More BandWagon in a moment. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, I am pleased to be joined by a fellow alumnus of that local college marching band that you've heard a ton about already in the first 2.5 months of this podcast. Yeah. But the catch here is we never marched together, except maybe during homecoming alumni band sessions, maybe. But he's got a resume full of interesting stuff, but I suspect that, at least at the beginning of this conversation, it's what doesn't make it onto his professional resume documents that may equally get your attention, my dear listeners. So please help me welcome to the program, Doug Cooper. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Rob, what's happening?
You actually kind of tossed me a subject to talk about, and I thought, haven't talked about that yet. That's kind of cool. It's a topic that I did such a good job of obscuring in that little intro. It wasn't so much as a teaser as a generator of quoi, but to kickstart our conversation, I can toss you these now standard few lightning round band questions so people can get a better idea than I gave them of who they're listening to. So first, what's your primary instrument?
My primary instrument, really my only instrument, is trumpet. That's the only thing I've ever played in any rehearsed performance space.
How'd you get started playing?
My older brother was playing tuba, and by the time I got to 5th grade, my junior high school, as it was known then, was piloting a music program for 5th graders. My folks were eager to encourage me to do that. And my older brother playing tuba, it seemed like it would make sense if it kind of stayed brass. The thought, which I totally bought into, was that if I played trumpet, that would make for duet opportunities and that would have good balancing or something like that.
I don't want to accuse your family of overthinking this, but there's some very specific musical thoughts going on ahead of you ever picking up an instrument.
Well, and the funny thing is, my parents were not musical people, at least formally. My paternal grandfather was. He was quite a guitarist and banjo player and knew all the kind of folks around the bands of the older fellas who would play at the gazebos in the summertime around here. So maybe it skipped a generation or something like that. But both of my brothers and I did a whole lot of musical participation throughout schooling and to some extent beyond.
Having ascertained that you are the trumpet player, what bands have you been active with in your life, whether it's playing or in whatever role?
Going back to 6th grade, I was in my concert band in junior high school. I forget which exact ensembles there were in junior high school. I think it was just concert band. There might have been symphony orchestra. And then in high school, that was when I really went out for everything. And so marching band, concert band, jazz band, symphony orchestra, pit orchestra. Oh my goodness, pit orchestra. That was a sneaky kind of favorite in its own way. I was a drum major in my high school band, marching band senior year. So that was another formative experience. In college, marching band, concert band, hoop band. And so that was another kind of inflection point where I thought for a little while about being a music major in college, but then I ended up getting steered off of that, or steering myself off of that, Partially, I blame not being motivated to practice enough, but
Not laughing at.
yeah. So it was those non-major ensembles where I flourished in college. So marching band, hoop band, and concert band, and those were so much fun. And I think maybe I was worried that if I was a music major, I wouldn't have as much fun playing or learning new music and things like that. So whether or not that was the wisest decision is for counterfactual history, but that was what I did at the collegiate level. Since then, it's been few and far between with playing opportunities. So many years ago, I and a bunch of our friends played in Tuba Christmas once. That was fantastic. That was the first time I think I had played a euphonium in public. Then, yeah, chiefly alumni kinds of opportunities have been the way to do that. One other fun sort of cutesy thing that we did a couple Christmases ago, I think in 2021, when we had to think differently about how we celebrate, because everyone in the house here can get a few notes out on at least one kind of horn. We downloaded some music off the internet and played a couple of silly little Christmas carols and sent it to my folks, and they thought it was awesome. Mostly since then, it's those just either alumni events or kind of just for the love of doing silly little playing things.
Part of the reason why we got together and chatted about, hey, let's do this conversation, manages to get me deftly toward the next question that I always ask anyway, which is, what's your current band-related role?
Although I'm not really playing all that often anymore, my band related role is I'm a band parent. I'm a band dad. That's really been my thing for the last, oh boy, 9 or 10 years or so. I love that too in its own way. So I'm one of those dads poised at the sidelines right before halftime with one of the podiums that I have to run over to its spot on the sideline right before my kid's band goes on, or being one of the awkwardly loudly cheering people in the audience at every concert, being there to help hand out the water after the halftime performances and all of those kinds of things. It's really great. I'm happy to do that. I don't have to practice as much for that, so there could be some upside there to make it so that I can have my audience to my kiddos band experience and to watch how that's growing and taking on new forms. That's just been awesome, and I'm really happy in my lane with that.
With this, I could tease the topic of people who become partners with people they met in band, which is neat. It's not such an uncommon phenomenon exactly, but there is taking it a step further, and then there's taking it a step further. You, I think, took it at least 3 steps further.
Well, and it's a thing where music was a big part of remains a big part of my and Jen's lives, and we sort of purposefully, but probably sort of accidentally brought that into our kids' lives too. And Lauren has really embraced it. Lauren was drum major of the high school band for longer than I was, and that's just a function of how different bands do things differently. That was also how we came to talking more often more recently too, because when the annual winter break alumni hoop band opportunity came up, I got excited about it. I mean, I noticed it every year. I wasn't as active with it as perhaps I should have been for a while. But then I thought, well, Lauren's a junior and can work out pretty decent things on the trombone there. And so I emailed the director and thought, hey, if I can come along and bring an extra trombone player, wouldn't that be cool? And so the first time we did that was 2022, the winter of 2022. We've done this 3 times now, which is amazing in its own way, but it's so much fun, not just to relive my hoop-in experiences. It is great for that. Hoop-in was so much fun, but to do that with my child at the same time is really like kind of having the life experiences fold on themselves, which is just so cool.
Don't tell your kid, but everybody wins here.
Exactly. It's so much fun. So that's how I got to be a somewhat more active participant in these things when they come around, either annually or a couple times a year. Yeah, no, Lauren has been a part of that too. We never said you need to do all of these things in the way that we did them. And certainly Lauren has veered off and done Lauren's own thing, and that's awesome. But yeah, to be able to play in the same ensemble with your kid is pretty extraordinary.
The way that I got to figure out that there was that family band dynamic going on, it had to do with the fact that, yes, Lauren was drum major of her high school band, and her band director sent her to the Drum Major Academy. And my experience with Lauren was to do with one of my major roles at the Drum Major Academy every summer, which is to be the fellow who goes along the line of students who are conducting to a recorded march and making video of them conducting about 4 measures worth of a march. And then we take it inside with smaller groups of students. We break down the video. It's not that much different than football teams going and breaking down video of where they missed that tackle and that sort of thing. In the TV room that I was working in comes this set of about 24 folks. I'm looking at the video of kid number 1 and kid number 2, and kid number 7 gets on the screen, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, I really don't have anything to say. So I said, okay, B11, because everybody gets that. That's the wrist flick. I tossed out a couple of codes for a couple of things that we can all look at, and we moved on. But it's inside my head, I'm thinking, that's textbook, move on. And on the second day, I get more of an opportunity, as people have worked on the challenges that they have had and have fixed some things, to be able to point to some people and say, okay, everybody in the room, if this was your drum major in your high school band, could you deal with it for a season? Yes, we probably could. So, here is one of the folks who clearly required tweaking, if anything, in that particular little world. And again, not buttering you up, because at the time I had no idea. So we get to the end of the week, and it's the big demonstration for the parents and friends and family and all that sort of thing. And it's only after that Lauren's coming one way and you're coming the other. And I say, oh, light dawns over Marblehead over here. So I thought, oh, in some ways that makes a 1,000% of sense.
I mean, I appreciate your saying so. It was a funny situation when when Lauren first had to audition for drum major of their band. The band was still coming out of COVID. It was the fall of 21, and so the audition process itself was different from normal. So folks had to submit a video of conducting something. There wasn't a whole lot of direction in those instructions for what to submit for a video. And I thought back to my own experience where, side note, I maybe thought about auditioning for drum major in college, but then ended up not going in that direction too. But I knew that March of the Belgian Paratroopers had a special place in the lore and tradition of the band. And so I thought, well, okay, sure. And so we did a little bit of prep work for Lauren's drum major video. That's what we used, I think, or I'm totally patching that together in my head to be a good story. But we worked on those things a little. But the funny thing about that with Lauren's band was that the way it's structured is that there are usually, based on their size, 3 drum majors, and those drum majors are a sophomore, a junior, and a senior. You have that continuity of leadership. You have that institutional knowledge, that organizational knowledge that's always there and won't have to be, it won't take a whole lot of work to replenish it, right? But coming out of the previous year where there was no band whatsoever and going into fall of 21 is what is band gonna look like? Can we do that? So there was a gap. That was like the one thing that could thwart the band director's design for student-based leadership in the band. Jen and I had always talked about, the stories and our experiences and performances and things. And so we knew enough, having both been drum majors in high school and having both been through the collegiate marching band experience, to coach Lauren up on a few things and get Lauren ready to do that. And so that worked for everybody. It was a thing where there was that gap for Lauren's band. And you would wonder, like, how many folks coming out of a freshman class who had not marched would be able to get ready? So Jen and I had just as much to do with Lauren going to DMA as the band director. That's fine. We knew enough about the DMA world and the people who were behind it that we could make March of the Belgian Paratroopers something that Lauren knew from a perhaps earlier than average age.
So you met your wife in the UMass band, and you and I both had George Parks as our band director. We were that era. And then here you have a kid who has gotten into band and has expressed interest in being a drum major, and it's the George Parks Drum Major Academy, and all of those elements seem to almost inorganically pile on top of each other. Do you get a sense that in spite of that, Lauren made that call regardless of what you did?
I hope so. I think what we were trying to do was to make sure that Lauren had some kind of support structure. Jen and I knew that for both of us personally, that the experience of being in the band was amazing, not simply for how we got to go play and have crowds cheer and that sort of thing, but it was a support structure for us. It was a you could use any of the terms that we so often use. It was a sanctuary. It was our tribe. It was finding our people, right? Those things mattered so much to our own individual college experiences, but naturally also the college experiences of most of our friends. We thought Lauren could benefit from that and wasn't necessarily going to be an obvious fit to some other kind of support network or little group of like-minded folks. And Lauren's above average height, long arms, and we're like, oh, baby trombone. That we literally thought that. And when coupled with how much we knew our musical and band participation made our college experiences the best things they could be, we thought, well, wouldn't that be extraordinary for Lauren? What we have known for the longest time, and this is something that I put into my work too when I'm talking with students, is you're at a large university. That is great. There are so many amazing things happening at this large university that might be bigger than your hometown. The real key to making that the best thing it can be is to find a way to make it small. So it's all about finding a way to make it small and having that group of folks that you care about and they care about you and you trust them and they trust you. And there are student leaders and there are faculty and staff leaders. That's a big deal too. And to all have this group of folks come together under some common purpose. And if that takes the form of musical performances, that's great. If it takes the form of supporting and serving those folks in some way, shape, or form, that's great.
Yep. My band experience also, particularly early on, was discovering that it was a group of people that not only did we share the same interests, but there were people who knew a lot of stuff about the larger university and so could become resources for how do I do this? What's the best way of getting this done or getting this accomplished? Looping back to the alumni hoop band experience, and we were on the grounds for a couple of those, I know. The most recent one, the band director gave it away to the assembled mass of people there that your kid is going to go to the same school and march in the same band that you did. And that's the further step number 3 or 4, I've lost count, that may set this apart even from the I met my partner in band and my kid is a musical sort of person. And at UMass, as it happens, there has been a recent history of that. I can think of a nice number of people, some of whom I marched with, and I marched alongside their kid in alumni band. Put it this way, it's not unheard of, but it doesn't happen super often. And talk a little bit about that.
It was a flip of the normal situation. So going into Lauren's senior year of high school, naturally there are all of those conversations around how many schools are you going to apply to and what do you want to major in and all of those other kinds of things, which ended up being flipped for a couple of reasons. For starters, I don't work in admissions per se, but I work closely. I'm admissions adjacent, right? And I work with college students all the time. I knew that, finally, that my professional expertise would come to bear on something I can benefit our family and household with. It seemed evident well before senior year of high school that what Lauren would want to do is to go to college where there would be a marching band that in some way resembles the experiences that her mother and I talk about all the time, and that we drag them out to football games from time to time when they were smaller, and that would be an important part of it. We talk past and present tense all the time about how, well, we did this thing and this was super cool and our friends, we all got together and did this thing. when the Christmas cards come, and I gesture because they're over there on the wall. Like when the Christmas card, who's that? Oh, well, we marched with
Mhm.
them in college. Who are those people? Same answer. So it was a situation where Lauren had an unusually clear idea of the criteria
Hmm.
of where to apply to school. And so it was going to be some place where we had a chance of affording it.
Mhm.
So state schools. It had to have a marching band of the kind that we talked about all the time, wouldn't stop talking about. And so we're down to applying where dad works and UNH because we live in New Hampshire and it was going to be a free application anyway. And UMass Amherst because we would not stop talking about it. And that was pretty much the list, which is so different from the experiences of Lauren's friends and
Yep.
other and neighbors and other folks we heard about. They applied to 8 schools, they applied to 10 schools, and we like our
Make your head explode.
yeah, those application fees on their own are not cheap. Lauren in a way made it really easy on us because that criteria narrows it down. We even started to feel a little anxious about like, gosh, have we taken this too far? Have we nudged this like just apply to UNH. They're a great band. We've seen them. We know people from there. They're cool.
And UMass Lowell is serious about what they do as well.
Absolutely. I've brought Lauren to at least a half a dozen of their performances too. They have so much energy, and particularly as they purposefully, no matter what they're playing, run right up to the front of the audience.
They are unafraid of creating sound. I
Absolutely.
love their shows. Oh, I love them.
Oh yeah. Dan Lutz and Deb Huber and company, they really do amazing things. And Lauren has had the chance to play in some voluntary participation ensembles there. The New England Youth Wind Ensemble was one of them, and the symphonic band camp that they put
Right.
on every year for high schoolers. But going back to the original question, Lauren made that really easy on us. Now, yeah, like we've said, all of these different things are stacking on each other. I know about how this stuff works because that's how I pay the mortgage, and I love doing it too. And we are quite familiar with the institution. It's a place that we've been going on weekend day trips since the children were small. We would run them around the pond and go into the campus center. And so yeah, it all came together that way, and it's a thrill. It's really great that that's how it came together. Just this past weekend was Frank Fiesta, a tradition that goes back to at least as far as when Jen and I were in the band. So we knew that that was a cool thing, and Lauren was fired up about it because they were going to announce the show themes for next year's marching band season and all of those things. And so Jen and Lauren went out there. We talked about this ahead of time a little bit, but Jen had the presence of mind to be like, this is not a thing that parents are at, and knew to drop Lauren off and drive away and let it be Lauren's experience.
Mm.
And we are doing okay with that, I think. But what both Jen and I were allowed to do is to carve this out for ourselves. And so, yeah, we have to, or we are going to have to continue to check ourselves with that sort of thing for sure.
I want to loop back a little bit to going into a group, finding a smaller group within a larger school. You found your tribe. A lot of the more experienced tribe members end up being resources for you, pointing you in directions and helping you figure out what's what. You have a title at UMass Lowell, which could speak a lot to what we're talking about, and that title is Assistant Director of Student Success and Retention Initiatives. Describe what in the world that means.
It builds off of that fundamental academic advising function where you're meeting with students and talking with them through making sure the nuts and bolts are right in terms of courses and scheduling and those kinds of details. But it grows into something larger than that. So most of the folks I've talked about at almost any other school in the region have built in other kinds of systems. And system means technology, but it also means a group of people agreeing to do this thing. Systems to help students when something might be going sideways. Another big part of my job is to manage a technology on campus that professors can send information into when the professors, notice that students in their classes aren't showing up as consistently or aren't showing up anymore, or if something seems to be off with their assignments, or if they're not turning in assignments, or if something else just seems to be not right. As the professors send in that information, which we humbly ask them to do, and they do now in buckets, that takes some management to gather data for which professors have sent in alerts, that's what we call them, about which students. And then the second key step there is to task a professional, either an advisor or someone advising adjacent, to reach out to that student and have a conversation about, hey, so the thing with calculus where your professor hasn't seen you for a couple of weeks, let's talk about that. It's not meant to be judgy or to give students more to worry about. If anything, really, it's the opposite. And so we're trying to see what's going on. In that conversation, we can help connect a student to another kind of resource on campus, which it would be completely wrong to assume that they just know or that they'll figure it out, right? The institution is too big for that. Like we were talking about earlier, there's a social interpersonal skills gap that we cannot assume won't rear its head here.
And with COVID, that undoubtedly has become more of a thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so we're going to have that conversation to talk with students about, let's talk about tutoring. That's not where only people who are flunking go. Folks go to tutoring when they want some extra practice, when they want to talk it over with somebody who's been through that experience recently and knows the ins and outs. Or if that student's like really going through something, we'll help make a connection to the counseling center if that's what's going on. Sometimes, and this has happened to me and every advisor I talk to, there are times where a student has decided in that moment to tell someone at the institution for the first time that they have a disability or that they had an IEP 504, all of that arrangement before. And maybe that's something where they should talk about how to set that up at the university. We're thrilled when we can get students to open up to these things, because that's how we can be at our best as helpers, right? To get them connected to resources and to talk through some other kinds of things with them. We'll get to some other seemingly non-academic topics, like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating right, or as right as you need to? What are you doing outside of class?
I was about to say, do you have a non-academic outlet that can take
Yeah,
away some of the stress?
absolutely.
So you get to improperly use your position to plug the band, of course. Yes.
For sure, yeah, at times. I mean, because that's the real secret, is to not just talk it through with a student like, oh, okay, having a tough time in calculus, go over to tutoring, check, and bye. It's not that. It has more to do with, how can I, as the advisor, as the helper, make this a better situation for the student going forward, right? And so that will take on some more strictly academic forms, but it takes on some non-academic, some intracurricular, or a more familiar term, an extracurricular form, right? Sometimes it's banned, for sure. Sometimes folks are hesitant because that seems like a bigger, louder, scarier thing than they thought, or than they were used to from before. But as we all know, it is a big family. It's people who are happy to be there with each other and take care of each other. And so that's where I and my colleagues can be, is in that position to then steer a student into those things that can make it a better experience for themselves, either in a direct service kind of way, or in a enhancing their experience and making it feel like they belong kind of way, and making them and their families feel better about what it costs to send them there kind of way. That's what student success now is. Like, it lives under this large umbrella of, how can we make that a better experience? If students are having a great experience that they want to keep going and that they feel like they can get help, then we as the institution retain. That's kind of like a weird transitive verb, like the institution retains, as if that's not what the student wants. But then from the student's perspective, we say students persist, or because then that's active on their part, right? When we can be in a position to make those things happen, that's the best for everyone. So that's what the unusually long and weirdly technical sounding title is about.
This conversation I thought was going to go in one particular direction because we talked a little bit about the topic at hand. It has worked out that it has gone to a couple different places that I couldn't have predicted, and I couldn't be more happy that we went there. It's yet another opportunity for me to talk to somebody about a subject I know nothing about.
I think that this is sort of what I've gotten into as a career is the next best thing to being in band all the time is, being in that university community with all of that energy, and to help the folks in that band or who go to see the performances like me, and to be a part of making that a better thing for them than it otherwise would have been. Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we finish up, I'm going to hit you with my now traditional, some slightly less strictly resume-based band questions. And the first one of them always seems to be, what's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played, either outdoors or indoors?
I am going to go back to the one time that I made district band in high school. We can use this term now because it has meaning, but it didn't at the time. It was like rolling into Hogwarts. It was like, all these people care about band as much as I do. This is so great. One of the pieces for that concert for district that year was Armenian dances. It was the coolest thing I had ever played. And I was in a pretty competitive, kind of intense high school band program in Wakefield, Mass, but we hadn't played anything in an odd meter. We hadn't done much with certain kinds of instrumentation just because of who was in our high school band. The way the director explained to us how to do the 2-3-3-2 in a 5-8, and just the way he beamed as he explained it to us, I was like, this is the best. This is so cool. I mean, I even remember the rehearsal experience of it a little bit more clearly than the performance memory of it. And I forget the guy's name, but the way that he just, it gave it over to us as a thing for us to, well, yes, perform, but also to learn from. That was amazing. Armenian dances.
So going in the other direction, what's a piece of band music that you haven't played but you'd like to?
The one that I always loved hearing on my CD that I had from back in the day was El Boro. That one just cooks, and not like I could ever imagine playing the solo on that, because I don't think I ever had to double tongue in performance. But the way that one cooks, oh, that would have been a cool thing to play.
Have you got a favorite band story you want to tell?
It can be summarized in one word for the folks who were there: Chattanooga. It came to pass that UMass football team was in the national championship game, which was
Are you kidding
extraordinary. And we thought, wow, what? What's okay, neat. There was a lot of intrigue and hope and murmur and conversation about would the band be able to go, because the game was located in Chattanooga, Tennessee. There were all of these conversations, and Mr. Parks was going to meet with the chancellor and see if he could convince him to let us go. Lo and behold, we were able to go. Cheers! Ah, yay! All of that. When we figured out what the itinerary was, it was ambitious to start with. The original plan was to fly out. I mean, the band never flies anywhere. Obviously, they have since, like to Pasadena and so forth. And so we were going to fly out in the evening, land around midnight or something like that, find a good old gym floor in the area, as was our habit and tradition, get what sleep we could, get out there and let the adrenaline of the national championship game carry us through. As so often goes with a lot of band stories, nothing went right. And so we were on the tarmac for something like an extra 2 hours. It didn't stress us out, the regular bandos. It must have done a number on the ad staff and the drum majors and those kinds of folks. we in the back of the plane were just thinking like, it's getting kind of late. We haven't taken off yet. That's weird. This is going to get weird. And it got weirder. We had to have taken off about 2 or 3 hours after we expected to. There must have been something that got fouled up about the school site where we were going to sleep too. I think we're maybe settling down at about 3-ish in the morning in our sleeping bags for what all the drum majors and the ad staff had to do. I mean, rumor had it that some of them didn't get to sleep.
Yeah.
Not like they tried to, they did not have the opportunity to get to sleep. So, okay, but now we've got to get out over to the game. Now, the opponent in this championship game was Georgia Southern. I think we might have been warned about this. I don't remember. But as we marched into the stadium, boos were being showered on us and go home Yankees. And some claimed that whiskey was being spat at them. I'm not sure about that, but the hostility of the crowd sustained itself throughout the game. And we were huddled in our little section. When it became clear that the football team was gonna win the game, we just lost our minds because that made everything pay off.
Charlie, while the Minutemen try to win it down on the field, a national championship that is, the marching band has already taken care of business this year. They won the Lewis C. Studler Trophy for Excellence. Now listen to this. These guys caught a charter flight at 3 a.m. this morning. They got here about 5, spent the night on the floor in a gymnasium, practiced. This is the first time they've ever been on national television, so they are beyond excited, I guess. Congratulations to them, huh?
I was going to say, they're really subtle about it, too.
That whole thing was an encapsulation of everything goes wrong, but you have to make the best out of it anyways. What we're going through in those moments in particular is preparing us to be better at what we're going to do once we're done with school.
Yeah.
I am better prepared for when things go completely wrong, when meetings get tense, bringing a situation to my boss's attention. And I had no idea I was being taught those things.
Those are the life lessons.
Absolutely.
You know what? The Mr. Rogers bit of wisdom is look for the helpers. And our mutual band experience, led by our particular mutual band director, was a little place in the band world where we're encouraged to figure out how we can be those helpers. And in a number of ways, clearly you've taken that and run with it. Not just the way I thought we were going to talk about, but that's such fun to hear about this. I wonder if there's somewhere online that people can find you if they want to know more about you.
I can be found in the UMass Lowell staff directory. That's easy enough.
Band parent, academic advisor, trumpeter. I'm sure I've left something off, but in any case, Doug Cooper, thanks so much for joining me to do this, and look forward to chatting with you again down the road.
Sure thing, Rob. This was awesome. Thanks.
Okay, on the other side of the next little break, we will continue with more BandWagon. Here comes the dogfight. In this week's dogfight, a brief follow-up to last week's second strain introduction of sorts to the presence of #MeToo issues in the band world. Among other things, during that segment, I made mention of the online advocacy of Baltimore Symphony Orchestra principal oboist Catherine Needleman. Again, her writing is what I could characterize as righteous rage channeled through a jet engine of vociferous written logic concerning the issue of sexual abuse and institutional misogyny in the professional music world. To boil down the first day and a half of episode 12's Young Life, it done blowed up. As it turns out, if you use hashtags well in your social media marketing efforts, #Catherine Needleman, occasionally you can get some nice results. And in this case, those results were to do with both quantity and quality. In addition to the download numbers, which were startling, I got the benefit of Catherine Needleman's kind Facebook share of the link to episode 12, which is to say, well, selfishly, I can say that this is some kind of a brush with fame, which is, of course, very exciting. But more importantly, the link has been shared a few times, including by one gentleman in Australia. Boy, when they talk about the World Wide Web, sometimes I forget just how expansive that web really is. And another few people commented on the post, suggesting other people that one could follow on social media if one wanted to read further about the topic at hand. So, Into this week's show notes go links to Abby Conant, the professor of trombone at the University of Music Trossingen in Germany, and violinist Lara St. John, both of whom I now know about, and the writings of whom I have now read and benefited from myself. Again, I listen to plenty of current affairs and politics-oriented podcasts, ones which are always encouraging people to get involved and express outrage when it's helpful and all that stuff. I didn't necessarily expect this podcast to get anywhere near that sort of activity. I routinely do advocacy for bands and arts education and the humanities and basic decency, as well as much fun as the band thing can generate, and I perhaps naively thought that would be sufficient. Certainly a good place to start, anyway. As a fine teacher of mine said often, never assume anything. So, we will indeed see where this goes from here. Again, selfishly, if this serves to help cast this podcast net a little wider, that's pretty cool. But if it contributes even in some tiny way to making various things in the world a little bit more right, or at least if it opens people's eyes up to things they should be concerned about, well then, so much the better. As one of my online post commenters said, there is a lot of gatekeeping and power imbalances in music and the arts, and it's been too easy for some awful people to take advantage of that. All right, after this last pause, we'll finish up for this week. Thanks for continuing to listen, and thanks to all the aforementioned people for their feedback too. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, hey, how about that? We get letters. More, again. This week, it's an email received via heybandwagon@yahoo.com from a gentleman called Wayne, who writes, "Good morning. I really appreciate your podcast. Your way of presenting thoughts and ideas about the band and music field, coupled with engaging interviews, has been refreshing to me. And because I, Rob, am a naturally curious person, I went and did a little digging, a little homework. Turns out this correspondent has, since 2008, worked in the Residential Life and Student Services Department of the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, serving as the administrator in charge of the 7th Company Student Dormitory Complex. He's also the founding director of the Pride of the Regiment, the Mass Maritime Academy's regimental band, honor guard, and drill team. Under his leadership, that unit performed annually in Boston, New York City, and Washington, D.C., and has been invited frequently to perform internationally. His name is Wayne Magee. He's a trumpet guy, and his story is actually even more interesting than all that. So I've dropped some links in the show notes that will help you learn more about him, if you like. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback, be polite, but let me know what you like and what you think might change. Tell me your best band story, or suggest a topic for a future episode, whatever you like. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. All those contact links and links to our news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Doug Cooper, can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well. As it turns out, word of mouth is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever quality podcasts are sold. And please give us a 5-star review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton. Detail, fall out.